Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Dr. Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my super awesome big brother.
It's my favorite role.
Cheers to you,
cheers
bro.
To you. And cheers to you all. Thank you for joining us.
Delicious hot sake toast.
Yes, indeed. I like to start our evenings off with that. Not that we're big drinkers or anything. But
no, sake
it's really
is,
just,
it's
not really drinking.
Sake is hardly booze.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's really vodka. I thought sake would class us up a little bit.
Actually, I don't like vodka.
We are sake fans.
Yes.
And fans of talking about sex.
Mm-hmm.
And every day should be a day for sex talk, but this is our day.
Indeed.
Fridays on YouTube. And, we're in for a treat tonight.
Yes, we are.
We have one of our favorite returning guests, dear friend, brilliant colleague, proud to say way back when a former supervisee, but I didn't need to teach her much. She's a natural. Lori Shapiro from up in Maryland, where I think things are starting to thaw.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. They're getting a little bit out of that winter mode, which we don't have much of here in Florida.
Right. So we'll be talking to Lori about what she's seeing up there and what we're seeing down here with this very, very slow, not as quick as like opening up spring break in Florida, but this slow transition, what seems to be the light at the end of the tunnel that's not a train.
Right.
The ending of the COVID pandemic.
Hopefully.
And what this is going to mean for our relationships and effects on long-term relationships. Either things that were rocky going into the pandemic when everyone's locked up together, or things that turned rocky as a result of being locked up together. It's been a hell of a year.
Yeah, it really has. And so I think there really are those things that we look at, like you say, there's that light at the end of the tunnel where we're seeing, hopefully, if we continue to be smart as we move forward.
Not like Florida or Texas or other states who are just there's a vaccine. Let's screw the masks.
Yeah, and let's call the masks and the vaccines and distancing all just nonsense. Right? As our governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis, you are really just a poor excuse for a governor. And I'm going to be gentle and kind and leave it at that. But this idea of we're a COVID-free zone? What are you, crazy? But again, we have to look at the rest of the more sane world. Everything weird and stupid seems to happen in Florida. And we have to look at the fact that if we really are moving in the right direction with all of this, those relationships have to kind of reconcile. All of the issues and everything that people have been going through. Like you said, look at the people that maybe started all of this COVID stuff already dealing with relationship issues.
Right.
Dealing with difficulties. So they come to a therapist's office and said, okay, we have this problem, we've got to deal with this, and then boom, we're locked up together.
Right.
All right. So that really has put a lot of relationships.
We talked about this a lot at the beginning of this, about the tremendous increase in calls to domestic violence hotlines.
Yep.
I remember in New York, people had to work out ways of, code they'd say on the phone, say you're going to CVS.
Yeah.
Right? So that if you're living with your abuser, how do you call the abuse hotline when they're sitting right next to you?
Right.
Very sad.
Yeah, it
But
really
it's,
is. So,
you know, we're all kind of guardedly optimistic and hopeful that we don't just go crazy and whip up new super spreader events of mutant strains. I heard Dr. Fauci say it's kind of a race between vaccines and variants, right? That if we can get enough people vaccinated, hopefully we'll have a defense against variants of the virus that may be less targeted by vaccines.
That's right. And again, hopefully the more people that get vaccinated, the better our chances are going to be with a lot of that. Right. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to speaking with Lori about is, you know, this idea of the difficulty that so many people were experiencing in their relationships going into this, the difficulty that so many relationships have experienced in the middle of all of this. And the one common theme is how this can be, whatever difficulty somebody has or began to experience in this past year, is a great opportunity to talk to each other and communicate in a way that they never did before. Right. And I really, that's always been my wish. And I think we talked about this from the very, very beginning, that hopefully people will see this as an opportunity. Right? Instead of just turning against each other, whatever difficulty has been springing up, using that as an opportunity to get some real communication.
Yeah. So let's get to our interview with the dazzling, brilliant Lori Shapiro.
Indeed.
And we are back with our favorite guests.
Our returning champion.
Yes, indeed. Lori Shapiro, Bethesda, Maryland's finest sex therapist.
I like to think so. Thank you for the introduction.
Indeed.
Yes. Welcome back.
Oh, yeah, so great to see you.
Thank you for having me as always. I look forward to and enjoy this tremendously.
As do we.
Indeed. You are our returning Jeopardy champion.
You know, that is my superpower.
So how's things now that springtime is slowly returning to the frozen tundra up there?
I can definitely say for myself, as well as all the people that I interact with and talk with, just seeing the sun has had significant positive impacts on people. You know, for people who don't live in the Northeast, and I've had the opportunity to live in the Northeast as well as in Florida for many years, the impact of not having the sun, even when it's cold, people don't care. But when there's no sun, it really takes a toll on people. So I would say now that the sun is coming, people are definitely, in spite of a lot of the COVID fatigue, feeling more optimistic about the future.
That's good to hear, especially as we're really getting up to speed with vaccines, with more vaccines coming in, moving closer to that concept that's been bandied about for the past year, herd immunity. And we've been talking since the beginning about how this stuff is going to end. And it looks like we are kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So, are you seeing couples and relationships sort of transitioning or sort of moving toward that hopefulness?
I absolutely am. I've seen a lot of couples talking about feeling happy and optimistic. I've even had a couple of couples have babies during this, which they were a little leery about, but ultimately happy. But I would say there's also, a level of nervousness. People are also feeling very tentative about rejoining the world and how that's going to now, again, change their intimate relationships. As we've talked before, unfortunately, at the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of infidelities that came out, that people either were caught talking to affair partners or, just being home all the time, computers being open. So I had a real big influx of infidelity at the beginning of COVID. And people have done tremendous work on reconnecting and improving intimacy and working on trust. People telling me that they're communicating better now than they ever have, which, as we all know, and to quote, Joe Court, our lovely Dr. Court, and he says, sometimes the best thing although it's horrible to happen to a relationship, is an affair. And I agree with that. I've talked many times with people about sometimes you need a huge explosion of some kind in order to move into the relationship that you want, in spite of the fact that it's not a good thing. Nobody wants to be cheated on or those sorts of things. So the people that I have worked with now, the transition stress is among them. So they talk about what happens when we go back to work, what happens if there's going to be happy hours after work, what happens if you have to travel again for business, which is a big one in DC, because as you know, I work in Bethesda, DC, and Virginia. So a lot of people work for the government or contractors where there was a great deal of travel, which really, gave a lot of people insecurity. And now they're having to say, how are we going to handle that? I mean, I've had couples say GPS tracking, checking my phone daily. I even had one couple say, when I'm in a hotel, when I'm traveling for work, I will put you on the screen on like FaceTime, leave it on all night so you can get up at any time of the night and see me sleeping.
Yeah, I've
But I
heard
tell people, well, I tell people that's not sustainable and actually
Agree.
not even helpful. That doesn't help
Agree.
with trust.
Yeah.
That what really helps is that, people are where they say they're going to be. They're doing what they say they're going to do. That communication is reasonable, not excessive. And that the communication isn't just where are you and what are you doing, but the communication is, hey, I love you. I'm thinking about you.
Right.
I miss you.
Not what are you up to?
Right.
Exactly.
Keep tabs on you.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's I want to stay connected even though we're apart.
Mhm.
Exactly.
I mean, it's kind of that age-old thing that people often miss about communication. Is that communication isn't just about talking to somebody. Communication is about achieving an understanding between the people involved.
And I don't have to tell either of you because you know this, from your years in our field, that it's amazing how many people come in saying, we talk all the time, but yet they never communicate.
Right.
And more importantly, what I talk to people about all the time is like, that's great. You can talk about things, but how do you resolve conflict? Who's the tiebreaker? What is the reality of what happens? Do you just sweep it under the rug until next time it's an issue again? So those things. And I would say the biggest things that people are working on is the rebuilding of trust. And I really think, and I work with this all the time, the only way to rebuild trust is over time. And I talk to people about how when you're initially dating someone, you kind of have the presumption of trust, that you kind of are like, okay, here, I'm going to trust you until I can't trust you. So I talk about maybe going back to that. Remember the time where you did trust your partner. Why did you trust them? And so, and obviously we're not talking about chronic infidelity. We're talking about, somebody had an affair or a one night stand. And how do we move past that? And the other big issue that I see people struggling with during all this is the why. And, I try to say to them, sometimes you'll never know the why, but oftentimes the why is because you didn't communicate, you weren't connected, you didn't feel close. The intimacy, not the sex, but the intimacy didn't exist. Anybody can have sex. It doesn't mean you're intimate. So we've continued to work on all of those things.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And that's so important. Going back to what you were saying before about how, while it's not certainly what anybody truly wants, but having that kind of experience in a relationship can be the first time they ever get any kind of real communication. We've been saying this for a very long time as well, that, it's very, very rare that anybody goes into a relationship with understanding and agreement. People go into their relationships with assumptions and expectations.
Oh, yeah.
And when do we know that we're violating a rule or we're dashing an expectation? When we do.
Yeah.
Right?
I have to tell you,
In that proverbial doghouse.
sorry, I just interrupted you. I was going to say, but even from the inception of my relationship, we've always joked, okay, what's cheating? And I used to say, all right, what's cheating? If I pick up a guy at a bar and I make out with him, is that cheating? Or if there's oral sex, is that cheating? And we always laugh and joke about that. But even from the beginning of the relationship, we talked, of course, me being a sex therapist, I think about these things, but even from the beginning, talking about that. I have clients, they start off with having the most innocent relationship with a coworker where it's, conversation at work, and then maybe it moves to lunch together, and then they start texting each other, whereas they think they're doing nothing wrong. And then when it flips, you're already too far in
Right.
to recognize that. So having those conversations when you go back to work, these are the things that are unacceptable. You're not allowed to have singular lunches, with somebody that you would be attracted to. So if you're heterosexual, it would be, the opposite gender. If you're gay, same gender. So it's making sure that you understand what my expectations are. Like, you shouldn't be texting, with a woman from your office that has nothing to do with work. And the other thing I've really worked with couples on understanding is that at this stage of recovery and moving out into the real world, you don't get to have any friends that aren't our friends. So if I'm not somebody you would take to lunch with that person, you're not friends with them. That doesn't mean you can't be nice and polite, but that's not your friend. Anybody who's my friend is my partner's friend, at least minimally. Like, if I want to have lunch with a guy friend, Mark has already met him. He already knows him. There's already an understanding. And I think that helps increase trust. When, I think it was in I think Michelle Weiner Davis. It was in her book, Healing from Infidelity. She talked about, if your partner was looking over your shoulder when you were writing an email or a text or having a conversation, would you hide it or would you let them see it? And so that's really the litmus test, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a couple now that got into a fight over that very thing. Just the gesture of going like that, like, hey, what are you hiding? And they just blew up.
Absolutely. I have heard many stories where a couple, I have one couple I work with, they're out of country, and there was never even an affair. There was just a presumption of something inappropriate through like Facebook, internet kind of stuff. And now the husband will take the wife's cell phone whenever he feels like it. This is what he demands, and can go through it. And the wife is like, even though I never did anything, and I have nothing to hide, it makes me feel disgusting. It makes me feel icky. It makes me feel disconnected from him, that he needs to go through my entire phone looking for something that doesn't even exist. And I'm trying to help them work through that, because the reality is, if somebody does have an affair while they're in the recovery process, unless they're a complete moron, they're not doing anything. And if they do, then 100%. But somebody who's truly part of the recovery process after an affair is not going to be texting other people, is not going to be doing things behind your back. So you can look all you want, but all it does is create the continued distrust.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, since this is a focus of your work as well. When people are in that position, and like you say, regaining trust takes time. How do you balance both partners' stories? Because one thing that both Ricky and I have often railed against is, when there is infidelity in the relationship, there's this immediate default to setting up like this victim-perpetrator relationship. And then you have one person that's acting that very, very parental. You're going to have to prove your trust to me. I'm going to have to see if I'm going to forgive you. And again, you get that doghouse syndrome. And that doesn't work. That'll, I think, end up doing more damage. So how do you balance, the story of both partners? Because very often it's the, quote, identified victim who gets to own the story of the relationship.
The betrayed.
Right. Well, I can tell you, I rail 100% to the opposite. Nobody is the victim. I can't stand the word victim. The reality is, by the time you get to infidelity, a lot has happened before that. And so what I really work with both people as individuals and as a couple is understanding. And I say it from the jump. Let's say the husband is the one who cheated. We'll just throw that out there. I say to them in session number 1, I am not going to vilify your husband for what he did. We will most certainly unpack everything that's surrounded leading up to it. Do I think his decision was destructive to your marriage? Absolutely. Do I think he could have made other choices? Because, the person who's the betrayed will be like, well, I could have done the same thing and I chose not to. And then I have structural conversations about, people and their levels of monogamy, and about monogamy being a choice, and how, I call it the Galapagos Island syndrome. I made that up, so you could quote me on it, where like, we are not hardwired for monogamy. And that for some people, under that significant level of duress, and they lose focus and they get distracted and they're looking to feel better, that they make a bad choice. And yes, they made a bad choice. But if you're saying to me, I want to save my marriage, there's no victim and there's no villain. That we're going to work together and look at what was the marriage like before, and what do we want our marriage to look like in the future. So the idea is not to repair our old marriage, but to create a new marriage that is better
Write
and
a new
healthier.
story.
Yes, I love that so
absolutely.
much.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean, I
it's-
let people unpack all the crap. I mean, you need to unpack it, but we talk about is how do we completely unpack it, then repack it. And yes, it's always going to be part of your story as a couple. But the question is, where do you see your story going? And so I really focus. I mean, I give them as much space as they need for, timelines, admission statements, disclosure statements, which some people really need, and letting people know if you're not willing to share whatever your partner needs, they're going to create their own narrative, which is probably going to be worse than what you actually did.
almost always.
Mhm.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of our peers, a lot of therapists really suck at this and set up that unhealthy dynamic in the first 5 minutes when the couple walks in. They might as well say to the cheated on, "Oh, you poor dear, you sit right here next to me," and they're both across from the cheater, like it's an inquisition. It's not couples therapy.
Yeah, I don't ever do that. I mean, I feel like if you're coming to me for help, number one, I'm the expert, and it's up to me to set the boundaries and the rules and the rituals. You're coming to me for my expertise, and that means both of you are coming to me. And I'm not going to pick one person versus the other. I have plenty of empathy for the person who gets cheated on, because that sucks. That sucks. However, the person who did the cheating, if they are really ready to do the right thing and make amends and step up, and you have a family and you want to be together, I definitely tell the person who's cheating, who's been cheated on, you're extremely brave. And I say it in front of their partner, because it's very easy to say, I'm done, let's get a divorce, the heck with you, I don't need this. But to say, you know what, I want to move through this and I want to figure out how to continue our life together. So, it takes a lot of bravery, but it also takes some bravery when you've been caught cheating to do the same thing. So what I say is, if your partner really wanted out, you caught them so they could walk away. They could be like, well, you caught me, I'm out, So if they're sitting here week after week after week through this extraordinarily arduous process, then they deserve something as well.
Yeah, and society's really flipped the script on women in heterosexual marriages. I think Hillary Clinton became kind of the poster woman, right? Before Hillary, women were, outcast and ostracized for leaving her husband. Like, you're supposed to stay and work it out. After Hillary, they're stigmatized for staying.
Right.
Like, did you stay with this cat? He's a pig. Leave him.
Right. But again, what does that really look like? What does that say to us about our resilience and our ability to make changes? So that's like saying, that there is no grace. There's all the ideologies around all the different religions about forgiveness, and which is something so many people struggle with. They're like, I don't know how to forgive. And I talk about how forgiveness is a daily thing. It's not like, okay, I forgive you, let's move on. Forgiveness is an ongoing thing, forgiving yourself and forgiving your partner. But what people struggle with so much is the person who's been cheated on. They're like, I want to forgive, I want to move forward, I want this to be a healthy relationship. But if I do that, then I'm condoning that behavior. And what I tell them is that, no, you're not. And they're like, well, what's their consequences? I'm like, you don't think thousands of dollars in therapy is a pretty good consequence for that behavior, where they have to unpack every shitty thing they did in, the last couple of years and throughout the marriage, and have to go through it and apologize for it and make amends and change their behavior and figure their stuff out? I'm like, that seems like a consequence to me. I don't think that's condoning their behavior at all.
And I think that's still a one-sided, when people are thinking that way, it's still really a one-sided kind of issue. I've it's a stupid phrase, but, almost sometimes drop the scorpion in somebody's underwear by asking the person who was cheated on to really do a little self-assessment, a little self-evaluation. And I'm very, very clear in making a distinction. I am not blaming the quote victim here, but nobody is in a relationship in a vacuum. So do you kind of look at this aspect of what responsibility does the person who was cheated on have in that dynamic as well?
Absolutely. And, I think one of the most pervasive things I find, other than just the lack of communication overall, is the lack of communication about sex and intimacy. That is the most pervasive part of all of it. Not being intimate, not being satisfied. And half the time it's like, well, we stopped having sex and I didn't know why. So I didn't pursue it. They didn't pursue it. It just stopped. And then you hear from the person typically who ended up having the affair, this other person paid attention to me, they wanted me, they desired me, they coveted me, they flattered me. So it wasn't even always so much about the sex, it was about being desired.
Right.
And so that's what's really important to keep in your marriage is how do we continue to desire each other? Like Esther Perel, to continue to objectify your partner, which I love the way that she has always stated that objectification isn't necessarily pejorative. We're not talking about like misogyny in society. We're talking about looking and feeling lusty towards the person that you love and how to maintain that. And I work with clients so often, and I have a bunch right now who are pregnant or just post-pregnancy, and dealing with, 6 weeks is not the clock. Like, what are you doing prior to 6 weeks? You're doing skin to skin with the baby, do skin to skin with three of you, or just lay in bed together and hold each other and touch each other, so that when you get to the 6 week mark and the doctor goes, okay, you're good. And the wife is then going, no, we're not, you've had, erotic time prior to that, kissing, touching, hugging, the whole thing. So all of these things have to happen throughout the marriage, throughout the relationship, even if you're not married. I don't know that married is, we call it married. I'm not married, but I can tell you in my relationship, I couldn't feel any more married if we were married. I mean, we're about as married as you get other than state paperwork. So I think that many people have that opportunity. And it's interesting how, even in alternate lifestyles, you find prevalence of infidelity where people don't do what they say they're going to do. So it's really not always just about sex. It's about communication, consent, understanding. All of those things have to be in play.
Absolutely. That's
Perfect.
so wonderful. And what a perfect, I think, just sort of synthesis.
A nice little bow.
Yes.
I'm really good at that, right?
You are.
So
Yes, I missed my calling. I've started watching The Crown. I think I'm actually a British queen, I've decided. I think I'd be really good at that,
I think you would.
right?
Think about that suits you.
I know, right?
Uh-huh.
People to serve me. Everybody has to listen to what I say. I'm all down for that.
So for folks lucky enough to be in the DMV area, it's not the Department of Motor Vehicles like down here. It's DC, Maryland, Virginia.
My website is Lori Shapiro, sextherapist.com. And there's a very lovely picture of me with shorter hair. I have to update my photo. I know it's been a while, but yes, Lori Shapiro, sextherapist.com.
Folks will know how to get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
And always a joy and pleasure and fun and giggles.
Yes, pleasure is always all mine. I love you guys to death.
Same here.
Love
Thank you so
Lori.
much. Another toast. Right, fill up your glass. Right?
Thank you, Lori. We love you so much.
Yeah, truly, one of you, just one of those people that we can't get enough of, and just can't say enough about how important the idea of talking to each other, listening to each other. It really is.
Seems so simple.
You would think, but again, as we were talking with her about, people just don't do that, right? We have expectations, we have assumptions. How many times are people finding out the rules in their relationship only when they broke them? And they didn't even know they broke them until they were told they broke a rule they didn't even know existed.
Right.
Right. So I think this has been an opportunity. This continues to be an opportunity to really talk about, and I think just understand why people came together in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And so often in sex therapy, we're reminding people why they got together, or, hey, remember what it was like when you got together? Why is this, why has life gotten in the way so severely?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So always wonderful to talk to her, and she always have, I think, really good things for people to walk away with. Really good takeaways. So, and I hope you have all managed to get something from that conversation.
Yeah.
So I think with that,
I guess that'll do it.
we will wrap it up. Yes, indeed.
Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. We'll be here next Friday and every Friday on YouTube at 8 p.m. East Coast time.
Indeed. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button. We really would love to hear your comments. So please send some of those our way, especially if you have questions or there's really points that you want to make. We really would welcome that. Like and share as much as you can on Facebook as well. And let's keep this going. Right? Let's make sex talk something that comes out of everybody's mouth. Right? Wouldn't that be nice?
Cheers.
Indeed. Cheers. Stay well.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.